As we're looking at this Independence Day weekend, which is coming up, and usually you have me down here to talk about issues related to America's Christian founding or issues relating to church and state, I'm going to quote a statement from you and ask you how many of you agree with this. The biggest threat to religious freedom in the United States today is Christian nationalism. How many of you agree? I don't notice anybody saying they agree, and I certainly don't either. But amazingly, this statement comes from Amanda Tyler of the Baptist Joint Committee. Baptists saying this? Well, I can tell you that the Baptist Joint Committee is under heavy criticism from conservative Baptists, and I do not believe for one moment that it speaks for the vast, vast majority of Baptists, but that is her concern, Christian nationalism. And she defines Christian nationalism as the anti-democratic notion that America is a nation by and for Christians alone. And she goes on to say that Christian nationalists want to repeal the First Amendment, or at least modify it a great deal. They, or apparently we, want to make Christianity the established religion in the United States. And so everyone here either has to be Christian, or else they'll be, at the very most, second-class citizens. Well, this sounds rather scary, except for one thing. I have been a conservative Christian activist for over 60 years. I know you're amazed anybody who looks as young as I do could say that, but I started in my teens. During this time, I've interacted with thousands upon thousands of conservative Christians. I've never met one who believes Christianity should be the official religion of the United States, or that this country should be reserved for Christians only. Maybe there are such people. If there are, I don't know where they are or who they are. I kind of like what Dr. Harold Ristow said recently. He's the president of Luther Classical College out in Wyoming, very conservative Lutheran school, and writing in the Federalist, he said that Christianity is the real target of all the hysteria over Christian nationalism. And the real problem, he says, is that those who boldly lift their voices on behalf of the church and her Lord in the public sphere are facing intensifying persecution for doing so. And then he says, prior to lockdowns, most of them never heard of Christian nationalism. Rather, it appears that this powerful gaslighting term created by neo-Marxists is another attempt to terrify Christians out of terrifying God's perspective on moral issues in the public sphere. It attempts to dissuade Christians from fulfilling their vocational duties in the civil sphere. So, Christian nationalism, if by that we mean a nation where Christianity is the official religion and others are unwelcome, no, that is not what we want, nor is it what our founders intended. Even going back to the Pilgrims, and I'll be saying a great deal about the Pilgrims in the next presentation. And by the way, out on my book table, I'm chairman of the board of the Plymouth Rock Foundation, and I can tell you how you can become chairman of the board, and that's finally let them talk to you into being vice chairman with the idea that that won't involve any work, and then the chairman resigns. But it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. But anyway, there is a list out there to be on our mailing list, which is free. Just put on your email address, and we have the monthly letter from Plymouth Rock and so on, and learn of our activities. But please feel free to sign up there to be on our mailing list. We'd love to have you as part of us. But when the Mayflower came over, there were on board those who were called the Pilgrims, and then those who were called the strangers, those who didn't really share the Pilgrim vision or even necessarily call themselves Christians, but were coming to America for other reasons. The first Jewish synagogue was established in New Amsterdam, which is now New York, in 1654, And from the beginning, we've had many denominations, and some who were of no denomination at all, and a few who were unbelievers. So the idea that Christianity is to be the official or exclusive religion of the United States, that's not what we're advocating. That's not what the founders of this nation advocated. When you hear somebody talk about Christian nationalism, and that term has really come in vogue, and you'll probably have heard it many times. When you hear that, best way to handle that is just say, Christian nationalism, what do you mean by that? And chances are they will not even have any idea, or if they do, it'll be something like what Ms. Tyler has just said. Then explain that we can talk about this nation being a Christian nation without meaning in that sense. If by a Christian nation, we mean a nation that was settled mostly by Christians, that has a culture that was based upon Christian values, that has laws and institutions that are based on biblical principles, and a nation in which Christianity remains a substantial influence today, by this definition, I think we could say America is a Christian nation, and I think this is good. And we do need to remember that God has established two kingdoms, church and state both, and that both have their roles in our country. I love the way Luther put it when he said, "These two kingdoms must be sharply distinguished and both permitted to remain, the one to preserve piety, the other to preserve external peace. Neither is sufficient in the world without the other." God has given a role to the state. He has given a role to the church. And these are to be separate. I don't want a state church in this country. I certainly don't want Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton running the church. And I really don't want Donald Trump running it either. I want him running the country, but not the church. But at the same time, I really don't want the church running the nation. But certainly I do want preachers speaking out as to what a biblical view of government is all about. So we do believe that God has established these two kingdoms, church and state. But that doesn't mean that they're entirely independent of one another. Let me move on to another topic here. And this is a phrase that is often used in conjunction with Christian nationalism, and that is American exceptionalism. How many of you have heard that term, American exceptionalism? And are we an exceptional nation? Well, God has instituted our government. God instituted civil governments for the purpose of restraining sin, as we read clearly in Romans 13, and as we also read in 1 Peter. God has established civil government. But that means He has established all civil governments, not just ours. Now, no two nations are alike. Each one is special in God's eyes. Each one has a special place in God's eyes. And God has used every nation in a special role in His plan. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but we tend to forget that God made the promise that upon this rock, and He's speaking to Peter, but Peter was not the rock. Peter was a little pebble. The rock was the Lord Jesus Christ. Upon this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. It looks to many of us like the church is fading today, and the church is soon going to be extinct. And yet, the plain fact is, every century since Jesus Christ had His earthly ministry has seen growth in the church. Growth, first of all, in terms of total numbers, and secondly, in terms of percentage of the world's population. The church seems to be dying, but that's because that's the way it looks here in North America and in Western Europe. If you go to most other parts of the world today, you'll find Christianity is growing. And particularly in Africa, we find that Christianity, and especially conservative, Bible-believing Christianity, is growing in many parts of Africa by leaps and bounds. But God has had a place and a special purpose for every nation in his plan. He used North Africa for centuries after the fall of Jerusalem as kind of the center of Christianity. We don't realize many times that many of the greatest church fathers, like Augustine, like Origen, like Clement of Alexandria, came out of North Africa. After the zeal there kind of cooled, then the center of Christianity moved to Southern Europe, and then after the Reformation to Northern Europe, and then to the United States. But there is no guarantee it's going to stay here. It may well be that the day will come when Africa or Asia will be sending missionaries to the United States. And I say, bring them on. We're ready for them now. I could talk about God's plan for every nation. But that means every nation is exceptional. But if every nation is exceptional, then that kind of means no nation is exceptional. And so I think the question we really are asking here is America exceptionally exceptional? And yes, I think it is. And let me suggest to you several reasons. One is the creed of America. G.K. Chesterton, who was an Englishman, said that America is the only nation, I think he was excluding Israel in this, but America is the only nation founded on a creed. You look to other nations, and they may be founded based on geography or based on a racial or ethnic identity. But America, he says, was founded on a creed. He doesn't really identify clearly what that creed was, but I think Alexis de Tocqueville, that French observer who toured America in the 1830s and then wrote that famous 2-volume work, Democracy in America, and he was using the word democracy there in a very broad sense of representative government, not in the pejorative sense that the term can be used. But as he observed America, he said that the Americans combined the notions of Christianity and of liberty so intimately in their minds that it is impossible to make them conceive the one without the other. And with them, this conviction does not spring from that barren, traditionary faith which seems to vegetate rather than to live in the soul. And then he says, in France, I had almost always seen the spirit of religion and the spirit of freedom marching in opposite directions. But in America, I found that they were intimately united and that they reigned in common over the same country. And Tocqueville noted also that for most countries, their origins are kind of shaded in the mists of the past. You look to England, for example, and you have pretty clear records going back to the Norman Conquest, and then fairly clear records going back before that with the Anglo-Saxon period, but the Celtic periods and so on before that, we really have only dim shadows, and we're not really even sure of those. But he says America's founding is clear from the beginning. You can look to the documents of Jamestown as Jamestown is founded, and the charter that the Jamestown settlers were given from the Virginia Company. Or you can look to the Pilgrims and Bradford's History of Plymouth Plantation, which begins not with the sailing of the Mayflower, which we're going to be talking about more in the next hour, but begins with the Pilgrim, or as they were called then, the separatist experience in England, and then in the Netherlands, and then back in England, and then the Mayflower, and then to America. And so America's history is written right from the very beginning. Puritans, for example, believed that they stood in a very special relationship with God. And in various of my books here, I've put these in much greater detail, the Puritan vision for America, which John Winthrop presented that vision to them way back there in 1630 before the Arabella sailed to Boston. Thus stands the cause between God and us. We are entered into covenant with him for this work. We have taken out a commission. The Lord hath given us leave to draw our own articles. We have professed to enterprise these and those accounts upon these and those ends. We have hereupon besought him of favor and blessing. Now if the Lord shall be pleased to hear us, and bring us in peace to the place we desire, then hath he ratified this covenant and sealed our commission, and will expect a strict performance of the articles contained in it. But if we shall neglect the observation of these articles, which these ends we have propounded, and dissembling with our God, shall fail to embrace this present world, and prosecute our carnal intentions, seeking great things for ourselves and our posterity, the Lord will surely break out in wrath against us, be revenged of such a sinful people, and make us know the price of the breach of such a covenant. We shall find that the God of Israel is among us, when 10 of us shall be able to resist 1,000 of our enemies, when he shall make a praise and glory that men shall say of succeeding plantations, the Lord make it like that of New England. For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword through the world. We shall open the mouths of enemies to speak evil of the ways of God and all professors for God's sake. We shall shame the faces of many of God's worthy servants and cause their prayer to be turned into curses upon us till we be consumed out of the good land whither we are going. Now, whether they were in a special covenant relationship with God, our own eschatology might cause us to question that. But it is clear that they believed that, and that they acted accordingly. And for them, yes, the America they were coming to was an exceptional country. But exceptionalism to them did not mean pride. It did mean privilege. It meant responsibility, and it meant conditions, and it meant that there would be divine discipline for failure or for apostasy. During this colonial period, we see sermons regularly preached throughout the colonies, but especially in New England, that they would call election sermons. Election sermons, commonly, the pastor would possibly be the best educated person in the community. And so if you lived in a community where there were several churches, one pastor would be called upon to give the election sermon for that year. It would be around election time. The elected officials of the community would be expected to be present, as would the people themselves. He would give a sermon speaking about biblical principles of law and government, and then he would apply that sermon to the issues of the day. As we move into the period of the War for Independence, we find this isn't a rebellion against religion. It isn't a step toward apostasy, toward secularism. Rather, the common saying in the colonies in those days was, "No king, but King Jesus." Samuel Adams, the man whom some call the father of the American Revolution, declared at the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence that we have this day restored the sovereign to his throne. From the dawn to the setting of the sun, may his kingdom come. The Continental Congress adopted a special song for the American War for Independence. That wasn't Yankee Doodle. The song was Chester. And I'm not going to punish you by singing it for you, but just the first line gives you an idea of the direction. Let tyrants wave their iron rods, let slavers clank their bloody chains. We fear them not, we trust in God. New England's God forever reigns. Not Georgia's God, not Maryland's God, not Pennsylvania's God, certainly not Rhode Island's God. New England's God was turned to at this time as the God of the nation. That's one thing that makes America exceptional, the creed upon which America is founded. Second thing that makes America exceptional, I'll be talking about during the next hour, and that is our Declaration of Independence. The Declaration, as we're going to see, is not simply saying, we're not going to be part of you anymore. It is a clear statement of a political philosophy based upon the law of God. God is the creator, God is the bestower of human rights, and that human governments are created because God has given the people the authority to establish government by the consent of the governed. And we contrast the American War for Independence with the French Revolution. The French Revolution is based upon humanism, based upon Marxism, although Marxism comes later, but it's the same theme. Rebellion against authority, it's leadership by a group of self-appointed thugs who represented nobody but themselves. And they begin a reign of terror where they exterminate the aristocrats, and when they run out of aristocrats to exterminate, they start exterminating each other, which I argue is the only good thing they ever did. And it finally took the dictatorship of Napoleon to restore order in France, and France really hasn't fully recovered since. But the Declaration of Independence and the political philosophy it represents is one thing that makes America exceptional. Another thing that makes America exceptional is the American form of government that has been established through our Constitution. A Constitution that has served as a model for many nations all across the world, that deals with, first of all, the idea that we have a high view of God and His law, but secondly, we have a low view of man and his nature. And that being the case, we need to make sure we have a government that is strong enough to preserve law and order. Because of human sin, we can't live in anarchy. But those who run the government have the same sinful nature as everybody else. And Lord Acton put it very well when he said that power tends to corrupt, PowerPoint corrupts absolutely, or something. He said something like that. No, absolute power corrupts absolutely, but that's one of the reasons I don't use PowerPoint. The other is that I don't know how. But as a result, we created a government that has limited and delegated powers, that separates those powers vertically among the federal, state, and local governments, horizontally among the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, puts checks and balances among those, preserves individual rights, and so on. But the American Constitution is a third thing that makes America exceptional. A fourth is the American free enterprise system, based upon property rights, which are God-given property rights, based upon contract rights, and made successful in part because of the work ethic that Protestantism, and particularly Puritanism, taught. This made America the most prosperous country in history, until recently at least. And as we move away from free enterprise, and at the same time we abandon the work ethic that made free enterprise successful, if we expect to continue to have the prosperity for our children and so on that we've enjoyed, what's going to replace that? Nothing can replace it, other than going back to the faith of our founding fathers. Still, another thing that makes America unique is humanitarian aid. No country in the world has done as much for aiding people when there are disasters across the world, tsunamis or natural disasters or man-made disasters, whatever it may be. America, and not just the American government, but the American people, and especially the American churches, are usually the first to be there, ready to help. And one of the reasons we can do that is that we have had prosperity based upon our free enterprise system and based upon our constitutional system of limited government. Still another is the American military, and we've been able to have a strong military because our Constitution provides for it, and because our free enterprise system has provided the prosperity that has enabled us to finance a well-trained and well-equipped military. But the American military has been used to defeat Nazism. It's been used to hold off communism. It's been used to hold off extreme Islam. And the military is one of the other things that makes America exceptional. Missionaries is still another. America has sent more missionaries for Jesus Christ throughout the world than any other nation in the history of the church. Now, lately, many of those missionaries have been coming from liberal churches, and they've been more social workers than preachers of the gospel, but even so, we have still sent missionaries in record numbers. Likewise, Bibles. America has been the sanctuary where more Bibles have been printed, more Bibles distributed, more Bibles spread over the world than any other country. During the 1900s, the Gideons alone printed and distributed more than 1 billion, and I didn't say million, I said billion, 1,000 million, more than 1 billion Bibles. There was one in the hotel, the Epicurean Hotel where I was staying there. But 1 billion Bibles, not just in America, but all throughout the world. In America, 92% of Americans own a Bible, and a few of them even read it. So those are some of the things that make America exceptional. Will we always remain an exceptional nation? No, there is no guarantee in Scripture, in history, or in current events that we will always remain the exceptional nation that we were established to be. There is in America today a drive to destroy everything that has made America great. It puzzles me, as I was mentioning to Buzzy and Patsy last night, puzzles me that out in California right now, we're seeing mob demonstrations where they are burning the American flag, the flag of the country they want to stay in, and raising the Mexican flag, the flag of the country they don't want to go back to. If you can figure that out, help me. I can't. The work ethic is disappearing. The free enterprise system is being replaced by socialism. If everybody gets on the freebie welfare bandwagon, who's going to push it? Most Americans today still claim to be Christian, although that term is defined broadly. We still send missionaries. We still send out Bibles. But why should we send Bibles? Why send Bibles if we don't believe the Bible? If we don't believe the Bible, if we believe the Bible is full of myths and errors, why should we be doing this? In other words, the basis for this is being eroded. Again, there is much good about America. And I would again ask the question, as I thank God for America, if America were to fall, where would we go? People in Europe, people in other parts of the world, had America that they could flee to as the last bastion of freedom. If America falls, what's left? So thank God for America. America is not the kingdom of God, but it is the best the world has to offer. So show your patriotism this Independence Week. Get involved, be involved in the battle to save America.